Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League was released last week and I had just watched it a few days ago. The movie is about 4 hours and 2 minutes long, which makes it the longest movie I've seen. Now, as the title implies, this is a non-spoiler review, but I will be talking about the stuff shown from the Snyder Cut trailers and the Joss Whedon version. I might do a spoiler review later on. When I first saw this film, I wanted to be able to watch all of it at once. Hence, in order to do so, I pulled an all-nighters to see it when everyone was asleep. I only stopped for toilet breaks or needing a drink. This film actually split itself into parts due to how it was initially going to be a mini-series instead of a movie at one point, but nevertheless, should you find yourself really unable to watch through it in one go, you can watch it according to the established segments. Most of us were well aware of Zack Snyder's personal issues he had while he was making this movie, which I will not mention here, thus not being able to continue his focus on the production, which I do not blame him for. So then Joss Whedon stepped in and took over the project in his stead. Looking back on Joss Whedon's version of the film, I didn't leave the theaters with my mind being blown. I certainly did not hate it, I just found it to be a fun movie, I guess, which may not sound bad to an average viewer, but as a DC fan, it really didn't live up to the hype of what was essentially the Justice League's first team-up. It felt kind of rushed and a bit fast-paced, the story's execution felt kind of wonky, and some of the CGI just didn't hold up well. It felt really lackluster. When it was announced that the Zack Snyder's cut would be streaming on HBO, I was surprised and did want to see it, but wasn't all that excited for it, mostly because of how they were constantly hyping us with a lot of promos and trailers, which kind of puts me off when movies do that. I did watch a few and they looked pretty good. The film's resolution is made for IMAX, so when displayed on TVs or computers, there will be black bars on the left and right sides. I get how people may not like this, but personally I want to see the full frame of the movie instead of being cropped just to meet my screen's aspect ratio. And after watching through the movie for 4 hours straight, I can confidently say that this is a much better Justice League movie. It was immensely satisfying and I enjoyed every single scene. I highly recommend it and you will not be disappointed. Now, when you go into this movie, you have to keep in mind of a few things. One, many of the scenes in Joss Whedon's version actually came from the Snyder Cut, be it action or dialogue. But some, specifically the action scenes, were presented differently, meaning that since the scenes of the actors were shot using green screen most of the time, they were later modified differently when comparing the two films. So for example, in the Joss Whedon's version, you could have Wonder Woman slicing up some parademons, but in the Snyder Cut, it actually turned out she was slicing up some rocks. So it wasn't like Joss Whedon straight up copied and pasted the scenes he took, which I can commend him for. But in my opinion, it's pretty apparent that most of the best scenes from that version actually came from the Snyder Cut. The Snyder Cut has so many details in between that once you finished watching it and look back to Whedon's, it feels like his is a far cry to this one. You will find it hard to enjoy it if you keep recalling what you know about Joss Whedon's version of the film. So I suggest you just throw away what you already know and go into this film as if you know nothing, but I can't blame you if you struggle to do so. Now let's talk about the actual film. This film really has a serious and dark vibe to it, and we've experienced that before with Zack Snyder's Batman vs Superman, but I think that movie was a bit too dark and should have been more lighthearted, but this film applied that tone very well and is befitting given how dire the situation is for planet Earth. The film also looks visually darker compared to the Joss Whedon version, which further adds to it. Not only that, but the characters also add to the serious tone, such as a lot of the humor from the previous version is not included in the film, like Batman's quips and some of the other cringy jokes. While this film does have its funny moments, its predecessor felt too lighthearted for a world-ending crisis. Unlike the first Avengers movie, the worst that could happen was an invasion or New York getting blown up by a nuke. This movie's threat level exceeds that significantly, and in the Joss Whedon film, the team was acting like they were having fun whilst trying to stop it. In reality, people such as Batman would take the threat seriously instead of throwing awkward one-liners, which made him feel out of character, especially when comparing to how he was portrayed in Batman v Superman. The film incorporates a lot of slow motion into its action scenes, which I think were applied very well. The score for the film was phenomenal and I highly praise the composers for that. There was one particular score that felt slightly overused, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. The songs used for the film was fine, but there were some that didn't quite suit the scene, which can be distracting, but again, wasn't a deal breaker. The film's overall story is more polished and well paced, and it wasn't just a transition of one action scene to another, and while some may argue that the movie had 4 hours to flesh out its narrative, it certainly didn't feel that way, and I don't recall any scenes not adding something to make the story more cohesive, and this movie alone really adds to the lore of the DCEU, and it's not just limited to Earth's history. This film establishes its characters a lot more, particularly Cyborg, and the other Justice League members had something going for them too. Now granted, we're watching this after seeing Aquaman and the first Wonder Woman movie, which were supposed to be released after this one chronologically speaking, but even without the knowledge of those films, this movie really fleshes them out too. Even Steppenwolf had a better character development compared to his previous version, and he wasn't just some one-dimensional power-hungry villain with a mother complex. His overall design is significantly improved, and he just looks so much more menacing compared to the Joss Whedon version, which hardly felt intimidating and felt like even Batman could potentially face in hand-to-hand combat. Now admittedly, his design felt a bit too shiny for my taste, but it wasn't something that I cannot adjust to or get behind. Now this next bit, I'm going to talk about something from the trailers that feels spoilery to mention, so for those who do not want to know or did not watch the trailers, I'll put a timestamp for you to skip ahead to. I did have a few concerns going into this film, but the one I was most concerned about was how it would handle the character of Darkseid. In the Joss Whedon version, Darkseid had no presence in the film at all. In fact, he was only mentioned once by Steppenwolf, and it felt really unnecessary since Steppenwolf's motivations in that film was to obtain the mother boxes, and there was no indication he had any connection to Darkseid until he uttered that line. Darkseid was heavily teased in the Snyder Cut trailers. I think he was even in the first one. The fandom were debating on his design, which I personally am fine with. I think he looks menacing enough. But I was more curious as to how they would incorporate his character into the film. Now I was definitely certain that he was not going to face off against the Justice League so soon, but it's because of that reason I felt skeptical about how much significance he will factor into this film. Darkseid is like Thanos, the arch nemesis of the Justice League, and pretty much one of the endgame villains. So I didn't want such a character to be teased so soon. In the first Avengers movie, Thanos wasn't even mentioned by name and was simply referred to as him or he. But thankfully, the film incorporated Darkseid quite well and established his presence more than I expected, despite him not doing much. And once again, the Snyder's cut exceeded my expectations. Overall, I had little to no issues with the film. There were a few scenes towards the end where it felt weird as to how it was presented. That's not to say they were unnecessary. I think they were great inclusions, but they felt out of place when shown in the order it was in. I had an idea of how to resequence those scenes, but I'll save it for the spoiler review if I were to do one. And that's all I have to say about the film. I give it a rating of 9.5 out of 10. I believe this film shattered a lot of people's expectations, and I would even go as far to say my enjoyment for it was on par with when I first watched the Avengers film. I'm not going to say which one is better, I'll save that for another time. I think it would be possible to shorten this film to 3.5 hours long and still be this good, because it would be very unlikely to go with the 4-hour run in theaters. But I'm glad I got to watch the full version, and it's thanks to the passionate fans and Zack Snyder himself that this was possible. Thank you, Zack Snyder, for the film, and I hope you are doing well. And that's a wrap for this review. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to what I have to say. So what did you guys think of the Snyder's cut for the Justice League? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments. Just do not include spoilers, please. I might do a spoiler review. We'll see how things go. Have a good day and take care.